I interviewed with State Farm and they were kind of like, yeah, no, you need to go get some experience.
I had to lose a title, head coach title. I had to take a over $10,000 pay cut. And I was angry.
There's a great opportunity and it's going to be a scratch agency. There's going to be no policies. So I'm having to go do that when these other people are getting to go do this.
And I think sometimes in life when you are experiencing a lot of pain, a lot of discomfort, a lot of irritation, there's a high desire to have a bad attitude, to want to quit, to abort the mission.
But I think if people can just understand that there's a lot of ways to do it, and just because somebody does it one way or another doesn't mean you have to do it.
Tell me 2 things that you attribute the success of building a business with 0 clientele.
Welcome to Good Neighbor Game Changers.
We're Matt and Brittanie, here to help you love boldly, lead with purpose, and shift the atmosphere right where you are.
This is your place to get encouraged, equipped, and activated to live on mission.
It starts by loving our neighbors in life and in business.
This is Good Neighbor Game Changers. Grab your cup of coffee and tune in. Hey guys, welcome to the Good Neighbor Game Changer podcast. I'm Matt McCoy. This is my wife, Brittanie McCoy.
Hello.
We are super excited about this opportunity to get the podcast launched. And we want to kind of just start with a little bit of a background about who we are, kind of how we got to this point, and get to know us a little bit, and we can build it from there.
Yeah, share where we're going in the future.
Yeah. Well, Britt, you grew up in Texas. Tell me a little bit about how you got here to Oklahoma.
I did. So I was born and raised in El Paso, Texas. So it's a border town, very unique place to grow up. And I lived there till I was 25 years old. And I had an avid career in volleyball. It was my favorite sport. I played for 12 years. I ended up playing at the University of Texas in El Paso as a libero.
We're minors, right?
Yeah,
All right.
minors. So that was a really big dream of mine to be able to play D1 at only 5'4". So
Ish.
The year that the libero came out was the year I was able to earn a scholarship, and it was an amazing time. A lot of things that I had to learn being a college athlete at that level, and yeah, it was very awesome to play for my hometown.
Yeah.
And after graduating, I ended up coaching volleyball. So I went back to my high school and I coached there. And ultimately, that's what led me out of El Paso is I became a coach in Mansfield, Texas. And so I moved out of El Paso at 25 and moved to the Dallas area. So
Big time.
yeah.
Wow. Well, I know volleyball was such a big part of your life growing up, and teach the kids the bump, set, spike one of these days.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I think Tenley is going to be wanting to play. So
Yeah.
be ready.
Absolutely. Well, I grew up, born and raised in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Was fortunate to grow up in a home with a mom and a dad. And my dad was a State Farm insurance agent growing up. My mom was a banker. So I started seeing and learning about the insurance business as a little guy. And, still to this day, have learned a lot from him and taken a lot of that and put into my career today. And growing up, I really put a lot of my time and effort, energy into sports. I kind of had some challenges reading, and I kind of was kind of made fun of, had to do a lot of tutoring, a lot of things like that to get myself caught up academically. And my release, I think, was sports. And so I poured a lot into sports. And fortunately, I excelled and gravitated football, basketball, baseball, and went to Jenks High School. I was fortunate enough to be able to play for Coach Alan Trimble, who's in the Hall of Fame here in Oklahoma. He's a legend, and learned so much from him. We'll probably talk about Coach Trimble throughout this podcast and what he did for me. And then after that, I was fortunate to receive a football scholarship at the University of Oklahoma. Coach Stoops believed in me and offered me a scholarship to go to OU and play and be a part of the national championship team and win a lot of games and made a lot of great relationships and learned a lot. It was amazing, but it was really hard. It was one of the most challenging times of my life. But I am so grateful for it. And yeah, that's kind of probably my, up into college and through college, that was probably my biggest thing was playing ball. And, we'll talk about some of those and where my faith kind of came in to play while at OU.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's going to be very exciting for you to kind of share for the first time ever behind the scenes for your OU career and just the disciplines and the things that you've learned and how you can apply them now. And that, as now you're a father and a business owner. So I think that's going to be very exciting. And I know that we're going to see some former OU teammates on the podcast. So that's going to be really exciting to have some Sooners on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think one of the things that was so neat when we met, having that understanding, when you're a D1 athlete, that's, I think, 1% of the country. So it takes a lot of mental toughness, of course, skill set, but grit to be able to play at that. And I think for both of us, we were set up as having to be overcomers, being told, no, there's really not a chance for you. And so I think in both, we had to just find a deep place within us to kind of have this overcoming spirit. Like, no, if someone tells me I can't, I'm going to find a way how I can.
Yeah.
And so I think that really set us up for a foundation as we now understand more of our identity. We have a lot of clarity of the cost because we knew the cost in sports to play at that level and to earn scholarship and get paid to play. And so there's that same cost when it comes to parenting, the same cost when it comes to taking the risk in the business realm, and the same cost where we lay down our life for the King in Jesus and serving him. It's a laid down life. And so that's exciting to explore. And I'm thankful to, I think, our families for supporting, because it costs them a lot as well.
Yeah.
The finances, the time, and just the being there when it was hard.
Yeah.
And celebrating us when it was amazing.
Britt, I look at it now trying to, manage our businesses and all along raising 2 kids. I think back now about you don't realize what your parents do and did for us when you're going through it. And so I am forever grateful for the sacrifice, time, effort, energy, financial that they gave to us. And so I'm seeing it now firsthand on the other side, signing up for all the sports and getting all the gear and all the things that go into that. But I think there's an aspect that's really unique about our relationship. And, your dad was a State Farm agent as well, and your grandfather. So tell us a little about that.
Yeah. So after, I was 25, I ended up moving to the Dallas area. And it just so happens that one of the biggest hubs for State Farm corporate was in Dallas. And so I was ready to transition out of coaching. I dedicated a lot of hours, a lot of time. And, I was just looking for something to grow into a higher financial opportunity. And obviously, with my grandfather being a State Farm agent, and my father, that would make me a third generation agent. And at the time, I really didn't have a desire to become an agent.
Yeah.
I never worked for my dad. I grew up literally in diapers, going to my grandfather and my dad's office, but I didn't have the desire. I loved fashion. I loved coaching. The insurance to me seemed really not like something that I would get lit up by.
Yeah.
But boy, was I wrong. So I ended up interviewing for a position in Dallas corporate, and I transitioned out of coaching and into corporate State Farm, which is so interesting because when we met, you had told me you had the same job,
Yeah.
but here in Tulsa. And I was living just 4 hours away from you with the same job with the same company, but we hadn't met yet for several years.
Very well.
So I ended up going into corporate, and I wanted to really share this part because I think people can see what they see now. Whew, this makes me emotional because I had to really walk in a lot of humility, leaving a career, something so comfortable, something that was very ingrained in me. I knew volleyball very, very well, and I had to lose a title, head coach title. I had to take a over $10,000 pay cut, and I had to leave something that I was just really comfortable in. And I just sense that there's some of you listening and that are going to be faced with this choice. Are you going to take a risk? Are you willing to sacrifice financially for the bigger vision that you're supposed to be walking in? And this was a really test of my heart and my ego. And so I remembered the words of my mom saying, if you would take this step back, you're going to have 10 steps forward. And I just didn't understand it. And I said, okay, Mom, I'll do it, but you have to help me pay rent in Dallas, Texas. It was,
I rent.
yeah, high rent. And she says, I'll help you. I'll help you. And I'm, 25 years old having to have help. But I knew that I just had to trust the process. And so I had to do that. And I was angry. I was angry that they, didn't match my salary. And it was just so many hours and so much work. And I was upset. So I went into this career completely unexposed. I went from wearing sweats, tennis shoes, t-shirts and polos to I'm showing up having to wear suits. And, I was in the Highland Park Tower, it was a huge transition for me. And I had a lot of growing up to do.
Yeah.
Tell me, before I go on, tell me a little bit about your
Yeah, so my journey
your
into State Farm was I had got out of OU and moved back to Tulsa and I had a business degree and I was a national champion and I gotta get a job. And I interviewed with State Farm and they were like, yeah, no, you need to go get some experience. And probably one of the best things that happened was I did. I went and got a job at a bank, local bank here in town, and it was so valuable. I learned really, and I tell everybody this, your first job, you know nothing. You're really learning how to communicate. You're really learning how to basically take all of your things you learned in college that I guess you learned and actually having to wake up, show up
on time.
on time, no excuses. And so I think that was one of the things, well, what did sports do for you? Well, that was one of the things that waking up early was not a big deal. Showing up on time was not a big deal. But there's a lot of people that come out, man, they'd been laying up in the dorm room and weren't waking up till 10 o'clock in the morning and trying to get to work now. So going and getting that job at the bank, I remember having to go, part of it was like, man, I had to start from the bottom and I had to be on the teller line the first like couple of weeks. And it was just like, oh my gosh. And I remember just being petrified that like someone was going to come in and I didn't going to count the money right but it was unbelievable.
So you go from winning a national championship, being on ESPN, getting to
Being a
being a
teller
teller, and you're nervous.
and I'm nervous. Like, am I going to do this right? But I learned so much at the bank. I learned how to read a financial statement. I learned how to read a tax return. I learned how to, you know, communicate in a business setting. And I think if I can look and say, what was the most valuable thing you learned? It's learn how to communicate, not only communicate, but in a business setting. And yeah, thank goodness those guys, they had a lot of grace for me because I had a lot to learn. So I did that for a couple of years. And then I was able to kind of get my opportunity to interview for a spot within corporate State Farm. And that was the same position that you were working. We kind of went out and worked with agents. We worked with their team members and we did some marketing stuff, helped them with business plans. But I was so much more prepared after, which I thought was a setback having to go and work at the bank because State Farm didn't hire me. And it was a great opportunity. Forever grateful for the folks there at Bank First.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, I definitely remember, how is this going to translate? How, I don't have experience in insurance, although my father, my grandfather were in it. Even my mother has been working with my father for over 30 years. I really didn't understand the business. And so, but same as you, I remember just the disciplines in volleyball and also coaching and how to be a teammate, I had to change my language though, because, I'm going from having a whistle and yelling and knowing all these, and to showing up to business meetings and
Communicating business
yes.
presence. Yeah.
And so that was a big transition. And I'm like, we're always so grateful for the people, the employers that take that, chance on the young, new people coming out and giving us that experience because, well, there's just been so much fruit since, those people that took the chance on us.
The other day, there's a guy, one of the loan officers there at the bank who really kind of gave me the shot. He's a customer of ours now at State Farm. He gets in a car wreck the other day. He calls me, and we're not out on the scene of car wrecks very often, but I just knew immediately I needed to get there. Bob gave me a chance. I needed to go, and I was there, and it was kind of like,
Full circle.
it was like, man, he's like, man, I don't know, what do I do? And I'm sitting there at the scene of this accident, but I'm like, I was there for Bob, and because Bob was there for me
Right.
when I needed a job. And one thing that reminded me, Britt, when you asked me, what was that journey? Well, like I said, my mom was a banker for years. She was a banker here in town for years and years and years. And so kind of going after and following in my mom's footsteps for the first couple of years of my working career was really cool to then follow my dad's footsteps of his career after that. And so kind of went down both their alleys and kind of wished I would have coached like you, to be honest. And I think the Lord may have that in store for me down the road, but it's a really cool, I think all of our experiences, all those things, we look back and it shapes who we are.
Mhm.
It shapes those experiences, translate. God had a purpose, had a reason for us going through the coaching, going through and working in these places before we got to ultimately where we are today.
Absolutely. That reminded me of my grandfather. Before he went into his State Farm career at the age of 40, he was a head football coach and
Yeah.
teacher. And so it's so neat that he had a teacher career and then a State Farm career, which then brought my dad into State Farm. And then I was able to teach and coach
Teach and coach.
and also do State Farm. So we are definitely, both of us have entered into a generational mantle of entrepreneurship
Yep.
and completely designed by the Lord, that this is the mantle that we're carrying, and recognizing that we're called to ministry in the marketplace. And so I can't wait to get way into that much deeper. But yeah, I wanted to share something about this is just to encourage that sometimes, I would say most of the time, you are going to have to sow your time, your skill set into someone else's vision before we're entrusted with leading and getting and reaping what
Wow.
comes from that time. And we both had that. We
Mm.
both started at the bottom. I was a freshman coach. You were a teller.
A teller on the bank line.
We were on the top of,
Yeah.
the sports realm. You were the top of the top.
Oof.
And then we go to the bottom, freshman coach, and you're a teller.
Yeah.
But we had to go back and serve someone else's mission, serve another person's vision. And you can't bypass experience.
Yep.
You just can't. And the things that had to just be sharpened, even though we had so much we had a degree,
Yeah.
we had this experience, we had to start there. And so I think that's an important message to share with the youth right now is don't be so quick to just want to jump to be, the corner office. And because there's so much growth that happens,
Yep. The process.
And there's a lot of sowing and reaping, and you have to sow. And how well you sow and steward things in your heart. When you're being told what to do, your heart gets exposed.
Yep.
How do you respond
Yep.
to someone, in authority? And that was an interesting time for me. But if it does its perfect work, then it should want to birth out of you your ability to go carry on and do and take everything that you've learned and become the leader that you want to be.
Yeah. It's interesting, Britt, because I look at some of our young guys and girls that we have in our State Farm agency that work for us right now. And we've got a couple of guys that are just raw, young. And I remember having a conversation with a couple of them a week or two onto the job and just reminding them that their time right now is so valuable. And for them to pour into this with all they have, because this will set them up for bigger and better and greater things down the road. And I think what we also realized was that this preparation time, if you don't take advantage of it, you're going to be, when the lights come on, it's kind of like you remember in a game. During the week of practice, man, you can prepare, you can kind of mess up, you can watch and film and you're kind of massaging, getting the game plan put together. But then in the game, how much harder it is when the lights are on to adapt and make changes in the game. You can make some, but it's really hard to make drastic changes. So taking advantage of this before the lights come on, before the game starts, getting yourself prepared for actually when you get into the game, because it's hard at that point.
Right. I think I wanted to continue to encourage the youth right now, especially you that are called to business. It's like you building a house without the foundation. It can look good, it can stand for a while, but the first sign of a storm, it will not stand because you have to go in and pour the foundation. And the foundation part of your life is serving someone else. Learn during that time. Make the mistakes on their dime.
Yeah.
And I know there's people that more than ever, you can open a business, you can do so many things online. But what I am seeing is these independent contractors that open up business, especially digital or whatever, they have no accountability. They have no authority over them. They're not growing.
Yeah.
And they're charging these prices that are very high, but yet they're not maturing and seeing blind spots because they don't have that structure for someone to, give them wisdom.
Yeah.
And I love that entrepreneur spirit. And I love the gumption to say, oh, I'm going to do this on my own. I'm 22, I can do this. I'm 25, I can do this. But there's just something about being able to be humble enough to say, you know what, I'm going to submit myself. Because now, as you grow and you open a business and you have employees and you have people reporting to you, you're going to have compassion and awareness of what it was like to be in their shoes.
Yes.
And to be an effective leader, you have to have an understanding
Yeah.
or there'll be a disconnect.
Yep.
So
I couldn't agree
anything
more.
about
Well, it's one where if it just gives you that perspective of walking in another person's shoes and just gives you a little bit more perspective. And so I think, the other thing that's going to be exciting that we're going to be able to share on this podcast is briefly some of the other businesses we have. And then we have 2 children. We can talk briefly, kind of give an overview of that. And then I think the final part is kind of what we're doing in the church and out of the church right now. So do you want to talk about maybe the kids real quick?
yeah. So, our story, we can't jump to the kids yet because there's just so much that we have to build upon on how we met and all of that. So,
Sure.
but I think we can pick off. So here we are. We're both single. We're working for corporate, huge corporation. You're in Tulsa. I'm in Dallas. We both were there about 4 years with the anticipation of, okay, are we going to be able to go do this on our own? Can
Yeah.
we become an agent? Can we, and honestly, my desire was, I'll be very transparent. I just wanted to marry an agent. I didn't want to be an agent.
Well, here.
Full transparency.
Here.
So that did happen.
Yeah.
But because of some certain kind of negative experiences I had, it actually led me right into the path of agency, which
Yeah.
set us up
That's up
to me.
Yeah.
So anything back on that time frame?
Yeah, I
life?
think, going through that phase, the role I was in, man, it was just like, it was purely I remember just doing a lot of building my business plan, gathering notes, talking to as many people as I could, kind of building for the opportunity that I got to open my own business. Because it's one thing about just selling an insurance policy. Yeah, I mean, that's one phase of it. But man, there's actually the whole other side of actually running the business, budgeting, forecasting, accounting, marketing, all that side of it there's so much more than just selling the widget. That I think a lot of people just think, hey, I'm a really good plumber or I'm a really good electrician, so I'm going to go open an electric. No, man,
Right.
there's way more to think about. And so when I got the opportunity, it was kind of one of those where an opportunity, but I was not going to get a book of business. And other people, I remember having kind of a heart check. Like I was just bummed because so many other people, different agents would die or retire, and then they would get to interview to get that existing book of business. And man, it was just like, there's a great opportunity and it's going to be a scratch agency. There's going to be no policies.
Oh,
And I was just like, kind of had to check my ego because I was like,
yeah.
so I'm having to go do that where these other people are getting to go do this. And, God had a plan. Things all worked out and, interviewed and got a scratch agency in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma,
Right.
which I didn't think that's going to be ultimately where my business would be, but it worked out amazing. And so I got that agency and we were fortunate to have some success early on. And, we were able to qualify for some incentive trips that the company would send us on. And you kind of had a little bit of a success early on and how that kind of merged us.
Yeah. So before we move on, though, tell me 2 things that you attribute the success of building a business with 0 clientele.
Yeah.
And now you're one of the top leading, not only in Oklahoma, but nationwide. But just if someone wanting to become an agent said, okay, I want to go talk to Matt
Yeah.
McCoy, what would be just 2 things that you attribute how you have had success?
These are going to be 2 things that I would say and see, Britt. It's going to be different for different people, I believe. But I think from my perspective, one is I would tell folks to get really good at 1, 2, no more than 3 things. Bring your marketing plan down to 1, 2, 3 things and be really good at those, not just a average at 10 things. That'd be the first. I think the second would be is utilizing resources, utilizing people that have been downstream before you and not being so that you've got it all figured out that you're not willing to ask for help. So asking for help, finding a mentor. And I was fortunate to have a couple of mentors here that really helped me just kind of lay the foundation, lay the groundwork. So finding a mentor and then not having your business plan to where you're all over the board, but you've just got it honed in. That way you're going to get really good at these, and then you can expand off of that.
Yeah, I remember when we first met and I visited your office, you were, I would say, super strong at like a 1-2 punch.
Yeah.
It was like, we do this referral program
Yep.
and we write this type of insurance over and over again.
Yep.
And you have really set yourself up in this area for relationships. And I remember that really being something super different in how I was operating the agency coming out of Houston, Texas. But it was working and
Sure.
and you still operate so strongly in that relationship capital, I say, based on referrals.
Sure.
And I think,
Well, and I appreciate that, Britt, because like I said, preface this whole thing was there's a lot of ways to do it. And I'm going to ask you in a minute about, how you operated in a massive city of Houston. But I think if people can just understand that there's a lot of ways to do it,
yeah,
and just because somebody does it one way or another doesn't mean you have to do it, but figure out you got to make it you. So when you're in Houston, you go to Houston, I don't know, second, third, fourth largest city in America. You don't know anybody there by and large. You're not from there.
right.
They put you in this part of Houston that is highly Hispanic, highly Spanish speaking. How did you go into that place with a little small, I mean, they signed you a little, wasn't a huge agency, but how did you go in there and ultimately become the number 3 agent in the whole United States of America of all the new agents out there, 1,500 of them, you were number 3 in this place. You didn't know anybody. How'd you do that?
Well, first of all, we have to say that you were also number 3. We discovered that when we met, that you were also 3 in the company. And when we say that, we say with there's new agents on board, there's probably about 2,000 agents new. We both became 3rd. He's a little bit farther along in agency. So at the time you were 3, I wasn't an agent yet. So
Yeah.
I don't know if you would have been 3rd or 4th.
Probably second.
Anyway, I really wanted to speak about this time in my life because it was not easy. And I think sometimes in life, when you are experiencing a lot of pain, a lot of discomfort, a lot of irritation, there's a high desire to have a bad attitude, to want to quit, to abort the mission that you were supposed to fulfill. And that was me. There's a temptation to abort the mission that you have on your life. And I think during this time, I was very close to doing that. I was very heartsick over relationships and trying to just, the desire to be married, the desire to start a family, the desire to, do I want to go explore agency, have my name on a building, take this risk? Or do I just want to, marry an agent or,
Yeah.
find that mate that I can start building with? And so at this ripe age of 27, I've been working for corporate. There was a severe amount of pressure that came in during this time with some things that were happening with the people over me. They were being removed. And so there was an interim period where they said, Brittanie, you're going to have to step up into this role, which is the head role over this territory. And so if it weren't for that, which was so devastating and such a disruption in the workforce, I mean, I had to be sent home. There was just a lot of things going on, but it was through that pain and through that disruption that my heart began to be open for, okay, I think I can take this risk. And I was almost like being forced like out, like you can't stay here. This is comfortable. I was 4 years in. I started to understand it. I was earning respect, having some success, and then it was time to go.
Yeah.
And I look back and I just wanted to share that if you're in a place that is chaotic, it's high pressure, it's uncomfortable, you want to quit, your attitude is just like you're just having a hard time, that might be a sign that you're at the end of a season and about to move into a new place. And that was what happened. So that began to open up my heart because otherwise I was comfortable and I was living it up in Dallas. So never did I think I was going to leave Dallas. I loved Dallas, but I began to explore agency. And of course, with the encouragement of my family, like, you can do this, you were born for this, I started to actually believe it. And I explored Houston, Texas, which,
So when you say agency, does that mean you open your own agent, your
yes,
own business? It's
yes.
okay.
So my name is on the door. I take all the risk.
Hire, fire.
Everything. So yes, it is no longer working a W-2 job
Corporate
at
job.
corporate. This is an independent contract.
commission only?
Commission only. Yeah.
Wow.
Hire employees, pay rent, all that stuff. So I got connected to, someone who was in charge of a territory in Houston, Texas, and never really knew much about Houston, but I visited and I decided that I was going to take the opportunity. And now your opportunity was 0 clients. So I was able to walk in with some clients, but I was not able to write all the products that we offered. So I was limited on what I could offer. So that was a very unique challenge. But I loved being able to learn. This is where that wisdom from the generational mantle came in, because it was like, oh, we've gone through the same thing, Britt. You just focus on what you can. You become really good at what you can do. Don't worry about that there's other areas that can do that which you can't, but do what you can really well. So I loved that wisdom, and that's what we did. We were able to go in and, it was not easy to step into this agency because, just a small example, I had a pink business plan, and they're like, no, we're not. This is not like, we're not going to read this. I'm like, well, it's really good. I promise. They're like, yeah, well, it's pink. I'm like, well, that's just me. Like, I'm going to have like pink in my office. And gracefully we got through that. But I opened it up really with that true, authentic, like who I am. And because I love fashion and I loved just really unique things, I was able to bring that into the agency. And I had a kids corner and I had just some really unique things that I was able to do. And that was probably the funnest part of agency.
So, Britt, you had mentioned that you went into this Houston market and there were certain products you couldn't write. I'm assuming that's because of just weather and different things
Yes.
within Houston. There was the hurricanes and that type of stuff. So there's certain products you guys couldn't write, and then certain things you could write. So what would you say is the 2 things that you learned going into a market? There's gonna be people out there watching and listening that are gonna have an opportunity. Man, but I can't do this product, or I can't sell that here because the demographic won't pay for it. Or what did you learn going into a market? The 2 things that you learned that gave you not only success, but also kind of being handcuffed a little bit with what you could sell.
Yeah, well, I know you had mentioned like I went into this market and this demographic, and just so everyone knows, I am Hispanic, but my ability to speak Spanish was not fully bilingual. And so I had to actually go to Costa Rica and live with a family for an entire month before I opened up so that I could really get comfortable and confident.
Sure, yeah.
And, I was able to pick it up and really, I had some hires that helped me. And anyway, so I was in a market where that was the predominant language. And so I'm like,
Spanish.
Spanish was their first language. I felt very comfortable. I mean, think about going into an insurance, language. It's not the easiest language to understand. So if you're operating in a second language, there's a preference where you just want to be able to really communicate in your native language. And so I knew going in that I wanted to be set up for that. And so that was the first thing, is understanding who my market was
Yeah.
and serving them well through integrity and through excellence without compromising who I am. So I had to have this dual, like, okay, well, I want to do things this way. I'm coming from Dallas. I want to do everything this way. But I would have missed it if I didn't understand the people that I was serving.
Hmm.
And I had to go in and introduce myself to the existing clients and connect with them, get relationship with them. I remodeled the office. There was so much change. And so really build rapport with them. And so it was about serving them and what they needed and listening to them and really sharpening the skill set on the products. And I think that's how we were able to overcome the restrictions, by sharpening what we could do. And of course, I had some natural zeal and passion because seeing my family
Sure.
and what they've done in their community, I knew that we were literally going to be a good neighbor to this community. I was in a strip center and I did a lot of community things, and it was also about having fun and not, but that first year I had to set out a clear vision. I had to set out a goal that I could break down into the day. It's like,
Yeah.
did we win the day? And, because if I was, okay, here's my goal, and I didn't keep account of where the score was, then it would be hard to achieve that. So I think that was something that helped us immensely.
You back keeping score again. The old athlete keeping score. So, Britt, you had an amazing start to your career down there, won every kind of award you could imagine. And I know you're being humble, but I am proud of you because you were in a place where female Hispanic in this tough market and had some restrictions, but you overcame it. And I'm proud of you for what you did. Not a lot of people could have done that or do that in that place. So great job.
Thank you. You as well. And I think it was a setup for how we met. So next episode, we can talk about how me and you met on the boat.
Cool.
Stay tuned. Thanks for joining us today on Good Neighbor Game Changers.
If this encouraged you, hey, share it with a friend and keep the movement going.
And remember, real change starts with one act of love.
Let's keep changing the game by loving our neighbors.